One galactic error triggered humanity's unstoppable fury. Part 1. The mistake. The Valoran hegemony had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. 7 alien species worked together under their banner. They controlled hundreds of worlds and thousands of ships. Their power was so great that no one dared to challenge them. They believed they were the masters of the galaxy, and for a long time, they were right. But they made one mistake. One terrible mistake that would change everything. Deep in the cold darkness of space, near a small planet called Kepler 442b, humans had built a research station. It was not a military base. It was not a weapon. It was simply a place where scientists studied the stars and the strange creatures that lived between them. 3,000 people called this station home. There were researchers, engineers, doctors, and their families. Children played in the station's gardens while their parents worked in the laboratories. Dr. Park. Una was one of these scientists. She was 34 years old with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Every day, she studied the migration patterns of space creatures that floated through the void like cosmic whales. Her husband, Lieutenant Commander Kang Do-hyun, worked as the station's security chief. He was a calm man who believed in protecting others. They had been married for 6 years, and they were happy in their small corner of the universe. Una had a younger brother back on Earth. His name was Oh Tai-woo, and he served as a captain in humanity's small space fleet. They talked every week through long-distance communications. She would tell him about her research, and he would tell her about his crew. They were close, even though millions of kilometers separated them. The hegemony knew about the human station. Their spies had watched it being built. Their scouts had monitored its activities. To them, humans were nothing special. They were a young species from a small blue planet. They had only recently learned to travel between stars. The hegemony saw them as children playing in a sandbox, harmless and weak. Admiral Tova commanded the hegemony's third fleet. She was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. Her species had been warriors for 10,000 years, and she carried that pride in every step. When she received reports that the human station was growing, she felt annoyed. These primitive beings were expanding too close to hegemony space. They needed to be reminded of their place. She did not ask the council for permission. She did not investigate whether the station was a threat. She did not send a warning or make demands. Admiral Tova simply decided that the station should be destroyed. In her mind, it was a small matter. Humans were weak. They would cry and complain, but they would do nothing. They could do nothing. On the morning of the attack, Una was in her laboratory studying data from her latest observations. Do-hyun was reviewing security reports in his office. The children in the station's school were learning about Earth's history. A cook named Lim Yoonji was preparing lunch in the cafeteria. A young engineer named Baek Junho was fixing a broken air filter. 3,000 lives moved through their ordinary day, unaware that death was coming. The hegemony ships appeared without warning. 12 cruisers dropped out of hyperspace and surrounded the station. There was no communication. There was no demand for surrender. The weapons powered up and the plasma cannons fired. The first shots tore through the station's outer hall. Alarms screamed through every corridor. Do-hyun grabbed his communication device and tried to send a distress signal to Earth. Una ran toward the emergency shelters, helping others along the way. Parents grabbed their children. Scientists abandoned their work. Everyone ran, but there was nowhere to go. The bombardment lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes of fire and destruction. 7 minutes of screaming and chaos. The station broke apart piece by piece. The gardens burned. The laboratories exploded. The shelters collapsed. When the flames finally died, there was only silence. Twisted metal floated in the void where the station had been. Bodies drifted among the wreckage. 3,000 people were gone. Dr. Park Yuno was gone. Lieutenant Commander Kang Do-hyun was gone. The children, the scientists, the engineers, the cook, the young man fixing the air filter. All of them were gone. Admiral Tova watched the destruction from her command ship. She felt satisfied. The message had been sent. Humans would think twice before expanding again. She ordered her fleet to return to hegemony space, already forgetting about the lives she had ended. But something had survived the attack. The distress signal that Do-hyun had sent reached Earth. It was broken and incomplete, but it carried enough information to tell the story. Someone had attacked the station. Someone had killed everyone. Admiral Shin Yoonji received the signal in her office at Earth Space Command. She was 62 years old and had spent her entire life building humanity's fleet. She had always known that someday, someone might attack her people. She had prepared for this moment. Even though she had prayed it would never come, she listened to the broken transmission 3 times. Then she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, her face was hard as stone. The news spread across Earth within hours. At first, people did not believe it. A research station destroyed? 3,000 dead? It seemed impossible. But then the evidence came. The recordings, the images, the list of names. The reality hit humanity like a hammer. Captain Oh Tai-woo was on his ship when he learned about his sister. He stood on the bridge, surrounded by his crew, and listened to the report. His hands began to shake. His jaw tightened. His eyes filled with tears that he refused to let fall. His first officer, a woman named Yoon Hana, stepped closer to him. She did not know what to say. No one knew what to say. They had never seen their captain like this. Oh Tai-woo was known for his calm nature, his quick smile, his ability to find humor in dark situations. But that man was gone now. In his place stood someone new, someone cold, someone dangerous. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Then Oh Tai-woo spoke. His voice was quiet, but every word carried weight. "They think we are prey," he said. "They think we are weak. They think they can kill our families and face no consequences." He turned to face his crew. His eyes were dry now, and they burned with something that made his officers step back. "They are wrong. We will teach them. We will show them what happens when you hurt humanity. We will make them understand their mistake." Across the galaxy, the hegemony celebrated their easy victory. They laughed at the primitive humans and their pathetic station. They believed the matter was closed. They had no idea what they had started. They had no idea that they had just awakened something ancient and terrible. They had poked a sleeping giant, and now the giant was opening its eyes. The war was coming. And humanity would not forget. Humanity would not forgive. Humanity would make them pay. One galactic error triggered humanity's unstoppable fury. Part 2. The response. The Galactic Council met in a great hall on a space station at the center of known space. Representatives from dozens of species gathered there to discuss matters of war and peace. The hall was enormous, with seats rising in circles around a central platform. Lights floated in the air, changing color based on who was speaking. It was a place of power, and the hegemony had controlled it for thousands of years. The hegemony's ambassador was a creature named Kreth. He stood 8 feet tall with a body covered in hard black shell. His species looked like giant insects with multiple eyes and clicking mandibles. When he spoke, his voice buzzed like a swarm of angry bees. He was proud and arrogant, like all members of the hegemony. Kreth addressed the council with complete confidence. He explained that the destruction of the human station was necessary. Humans had been expanding too fast. They had built their station too close to hegemony territory. The attack was simply a correction, a reminder of the natural order. He called it a regrettable necessity and suggested that humans should be grateful for the lesson. The other species in the council listened without much interest. Humans were not important to them. They were a young race with a small fleet and a single home world. What did it matter if some of them died? The galaxy was vast, and stronger species had crushed weaker ones since the beginning of time. Then the human ambassador stepped forward. Dr. Beak. Jian was a small woman with gray hair tied back in a simple bun. She was 58 years old and had spent most of her life as a historian. She had studied ancient wars and forgotten civilizations. She understood how empires rose and fell. The hegemony looked at her and saw nothing threatening. She was soft-spoken and polite. She did not shout or make threats. She simply stood on the platform and waited for silence. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear. She presented evidence to the council. Communication logs showed that the human station had requested permission to operate in that area of space. Scientific data proved that the station had no military purpose. Images showed the researchers at work, the children at play, the families living their peaceful lives. Then she showed the council what remained after the attack. Twisted metal, burned bodies, a child's toy floating among the wreckage. The images were terrible, and some of the younger species looked away. But the hegemony representatives did not react. To them, it was nothing special. John finished her presentation with simple words. "You have made an error," she said. "Not a political error, not a strategic error, a fundamental error in judgment about who we are and what we are capable of." Kreth laughed. The sound was like rocks grinding together. "And what will you do, little human? You have 50 ships. We have 50,000. You have one world. We have hundreds. Your threats are meaningless." Jian did not argue. She simply nodded and returned to her seat. The council dismissed the matter and moved on to other business. In their minds, the human problem was solved. They were wrong. Back on Earth, something was happening that the galaxy had never seen before. Humanity was transforming. Every factory, every shipyard, every laboratory was changing its purpose. Within days of the attack, the entire planet had shifted to war production. Director Han Sunwoo stood before the United Nations and laid out the plan. He was a thin man with tired eyes, but his voice was strong. He had spent 20 years building Earth's industrial capacity, preparing for a day that he hoped would never come. Now that day had arrived, and he was ready. "We will build ships," he said. "We will build weapons. We will build until we have enough strength to make them answer for what they have done. This is not a request. This is not a suggestion. This is what we are going to do." The nations of Earth, which had argued and fought among themselves for centuries, came together in that moment. Old enemies shook hands. Old grudges were forgotten. When humanity faced a threat from outside, they stopped being Americans or Russians or Chinese or Koreans. They became simply human. Factories that had made cars began making ship parts. Laboratories that had researched medicine began researching weapons. Universities that had trained doctors began training soldiers. Every person on Earth found a role in the war effort. Grandmothers knitted blankets for soldiers. Children collected scrap metal. Artists painted recruitment posters. Writers told stories of the dead to keep their memory alive. The transformation was astonishing. In 6 months, humanity's fleet grew from 50 ships to 500. In 1 year, it reached 2,000. By the end of the second year, humanity had built more warships than the hegemony had destroyed in their entire history. The aliens could not understand what they were seeing. No species had ever mobilized so quickly. No species had ever turned their entire civilization into a war machine with such speed and determination. The hegemony's spies sent report after report, each one more alarming than the last. "They are not sleeping," one spy wrote. Their factories run day and night. Their workers take shifts so production never stops. They are building ships faster than we can count them. Another spy reported something even more disturbing. They have a concept they call total war. It means that every person, every resource, every thought is dedicated to victory. They do not fight with their military. They fight with their entire species. Admiral Tova received these reports and felt the first hint of concern. She had expected humans to cry and complain. She had expected them to beg for peace. Instead, they were building an armada, but it was too late to change course. The hegemony could not admit they had made a mistake. Their pride would not allow it. So they prepared their own forces for battle, confident that their experience and numbers would win in the end. Captain O Tai Wu had been promoted to Commodore. He now commanded a fleet of 100 ships, with the battleship Kepler's Memory as his flagship. The ship had been built in record time, and her crew had named her in honor of the dead. Every person on board had lost someone in the attack. They were united by grief and anger, and they were ready to fight. On the day before the first offensive, Tai Wu gathered his officers in the command room. A holographic map of hegemony space floated before them, showing enemy positions and patrol routes. The task ahead was enormous. They were going to attack an empire that had ruled for 12,000 years. "I know what you are thinking," Tai Wu said. "You are thinking that this is impossible. You are thinking that we are too small and they are too big. But I want you to remember something. 2 years ago, they thought we were nothing. They thought they could kill our families without consequence. They were wrong then, and they are wrong now." He pointed at the map. "We are not going to defeat them with numbers. We are going to defeat them with will. We are going to fight harder, move faster, and endure longer than they ever thought possible. We are going to show them what humanity can do." The officers saluted. The fleet powered up its engines. The war had truly begun, and somewhere in the vastness of space, the hegemony was about to learn that they had made the worst mistake in galactic history. One galactic error triggered humanity's unstoppable fury. Part 5. The New Order. The war ended not with fire, but with words spoken across a table. The Treaty of Seoul was signed aboard the battleship Kepler's Memory, in a conference room that had been converted from a cargo bay. Human engineers had worked through the night to prepare the space. They hung banners showing the flags of every nation on Earth. They placed flowers from a dozen worlds on the tables. They wanted the hegemony to understand that humans could create beauty as easily as they could create destruction. Commodore O Tai Wu stood at the back of the room, watching the ceremony. He wore his dress uniform, cleaned and pressed for the first time in years. The medals on his chest told the story of his war. Battles won, ships captured, lives saved. But his eyes told a different story. They were tired and sad, carrying the weight of everyone he had lost. The hegemony delegation entered slowly, their heads bowed. 3 years ago, they had walked with pride and arrogance. Now they shuffled like prisoners approaching judgment. Admiral Tova was among them, stripped of her rank and her honor. She could not meet anyone's eyes. Dr. Big Jion represented humanity at the signing. She had spent weeks negotiating the terms, fighting for every point, refusing to accept anything less than justice. The final treaty was harsh but fair. The hegemony would pay reparations to every family that had lost someone in the war. They would open their hyperspace routes to all species. They would dissolve their monopoly on interstellar trade. And they would accept human observers on their worlds to ensure they never again attacked without cause. The most important change was the creation of a new galactic charter. For 12,000 years, the strong had ruled the weak in this galaxy. Species with more ships and more soldiers had crushed those with fewer. The old order had been built on fear and domination. The new order would be different. The charter declared that all spacefaring species were equal, regardless of their size or strength. It established courts to settle disputes and prevent wars. It created councils where every voice could be heard. The galaxy would no longer belong to the powerful. It would belong to everyone. Admiral Tova was tried for war crimes before a joint tribunal. Humans and aliens sat together in judgment, listening to evidence of the attack on Kepler Station. The images of the destroyed station were shown again. The names of the dead were read aloud, one by one, taking hours to complete. Tova did not deny what she had done. She could not deny it. She simply sat in silence, her forearms folded in her lap, her eyes staring at nothing. The tribunal found her guilty, but the sentence surprised everyone. Humanity had abolished capital punishment centuries ago. They did not believe in killing as a form of justice. So Tova was not executed. Instead, she was sentenced to spend the rest of her life teaching at a memorial academy on the rebuilt Kepler Station. Every day, she would walk past the memorial garden where the names of the dead were carved in stone. Every day, she would teach students about the cost of arrogance and cruelty. Every day, she would remember what she had done. Some humans complained that the punishment was too light. They wanted blood. They wanted revenge. But the tribunal's judgment stood. Tova would live, but she would live with her guilt forever. In some ways, that was worse than death. Dr. Beek Jai became the first human to serve on the reformed Galactic Council. She took her seat among species that had once dismissed her people as primitive and weak. Now they listened when she spoke. Now they respected her words. Her opening address was broadcast across the galaxy. Billions of beings watched as the small, human woman stood at the podium and faced the assembled representatives. "You feared us because you thought we were weak," she said. "You fear us now because you know we are strong. But strength is not why we are here. We are here because the galaxy deserves better than rule by fear. We are here to prove that even those who have been wronged can choose justice over vengeance. We are here to build something new, something better, something that will last for generations to come." She paused, letting her words settle over the assembly. "We do not ask you to trust us immediately. Trust must be earned. But we ask you to give us a chance. Work with us. Talk with us. Let us show you that humans can be partners, not conquerors. The war is over. Now the real work begins." The response was not immediate. Many species remained suspicious. They had seen what humans could do in battle. They were not sure they wanted to see what humans could do in peace. But slowly, carefully, relationships began to form. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchanges were organized. The galaxy started to heal. Commodore Otaiwu retired from military service. He had spent 3 years fighting, and he was tired. Tired of death, tired of war, tired of carrying the weight of revenge on his shoulders. He wanted something different. He wanted something simple. He returned to Earth and opened a small restaurant in Bizen, the city where he had grown up. It was a humble place with wooden tables and paper lanterns. He served traditional Korean dishes, bulgogi, bibimbap, japchae, foods that his grandmother had taught him to make when he was a boy. At first, only humans came to eat there. But word spread, and soon aliens began to arrive as well. They were curious about human food, curious about human culture, curious about the species that had shaken the galaxy. Taiwu served them all with the same quiet smile, never judging, never refusing. One day, a young alien entered the restaurant. She was from a species that had fought against humanity in the war. Her older brother had been killed in a battle that Taiwu had led. She stood in the doorway, uncertain, afraid. Taiwu walked to her and bowed politely. "Welcome," he said. "Please, sit down. Are you hungry?" The alien hesitated. "You killed my brother." "I know," Taiwu replied. "I killed many brothers, many sisters, many sons and daughters. I do not pretend to be innocent, but I am not fighting anymore. I am cooking now. Please, let me make you something to eat." The alien sat down. Taiwu brought her food and sat across from her. They talked for hours about the war, about loss, about grief, about hope. When she left, she was not his enemy anymore. She was something else. She was the beginning of understanding. Years passed. The galaxy changed. Humanity grew and spread across the stars, building colonies on worlds that had once been forbidden to them. They brought their determination and their creativity, their stubbornness and their compassion. They made mistakes, as all species do, but they also made wonders. A reporter once visited Taiwu's restaurant to interview him about the war. She wanted to know about the battles, the strategies, the moments of triumph and despair. She wanted to hear stories of heroism and revenge. Taiwu listened to her questions politely. Then he shook his head. "You want me to talk about killing," he said. "But I am tired of talking about killing. I would rather talk about cooking. I would rather talk about the way food brings people together. I would rather talk about healing instead of hurting." The reporter pressed him. "But the war changed everything. Don't you want people to remember?" Taiwu was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. "My sister died because someone thought her life did not matter. I fought so that no one would ever make that mistake again. Not about humans, not about anyone. That is what I want people to remember. Not the battles, not the blood. I want them to remember that every life has value. Every life deserves respect. Every life matters." He stood up and walked to the kitchen. "Now please excuse me. I have customers to feed." The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity was not a species to be dismissed or ignored. They were a species that remembered their dead. They were a species that fought for justice. They were a species that, when the fighting was done, could put down their weapons and build something better. They were human. And that was enough. The war that had begun with one galactic error ended with a new beginning. The fury that had burned so bright transformed into something else. Hope for a future where no one would ever have to make the same mistake again. And somewhere in Bizen, an old soldier cooked dinner for his guests, finally at peace. One galactic error triggered humanity's unstoppable. Fury Part 3. The campaign, the hegemony's first major counterattack, came at a human colony called New Bizen. It was a mining world with a population of 50,000 people. Most of them were workers who extracted rare minerals from the planet's crust. They were not soldiers. They were not fighters. They were ordinary people trying to build a new life among the stars. The hegemony sent 12 cruisers to destroy New Bizen. They expected an easy victory, just like the attack on Kepler Station. They expected the humans to run and hide. They expected to crush another weak target and send another message of fear. Commander Yu Mei was waiting for them. She was 43 years old and had spent most of her life as a freighter captain. She knew nothing about military tactics. She had never fired a weapon in anger. But she understood one thing better than any admiral in the galaxy. She understood logistics. She understood supply lines. She understood how to move things from one place to another. When the war began, Mei had volunteered for military service. The Space Command had made her a commander and given her responsibility for New Bizen's defense. She had no warships. She had only cargo freighters, mining vessels, and a handful of shuttles. Any reasonable person would have evacuated and left the planet to the enemy. Mei was not reasonable. She was Korean, and Koreans did not abandon their homes. She spent weeks preparing. She armed the freighters with mining lasers and industrial cutters. She filled the cargo holds with metal plates for makeshift armor. She trained the miners to operate weapons they had never seen before. She studied every piece of information about hegemony tactics and found their weaknesses. When the 12 cruisers arrived, They found the planet surrounded by a wall of converted ships. The freighters moved in strange patterns that confused the enemy sensors. The mining vessels released clouds of dust and debris that blocked targeting systems. The shuttles darted between the larger ships, launching missiles from unexpected angles. The battle lasted 14 hours. The hegemony commanders could not understand what was happening. Every tactic they tried was countered. Every attack was blocked. The humans refused to retreat even when they took heavy damage. Ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting until their last breath died by the time reinforcements arrived from Earth. 9 of the 12 hegemony cruisers were floating wreckage. The remaining 3 had fled into hyperspace. New Bizan was battered but safe. Myray became a hero overnight. Her tactics were studied and copied across the human fleet. But she did not celebrate. She had lost 200 people in the battle, and she mourned each one of them. "We won," she told a reporter who asked about her victory. "But the cost was too high. Every death is a tragedy. I do not want glory. I want this war to end." Across the front lines, similar stories repeated themselves. Human forces attacked hegemony positions with a ferocity that shocked the galaxy. Commodore Otaiwo led his fleet in a campaign that struck at multiple systems simultaneously. The enemy could not predict where the humans would appear next. As soon as they gathered forces in one place, Taiwo would attack somewhere else. The hegemony officers could not understand human tactics. Everything about the way humans fought seemed wrong to them. In hegemony culture, soldiers retreated when the odds were against them. They surrendered when defeat was certain. They valued their lives above victory. Humans did not think this way. They did not retreat when they should. They did not surrender when they were defeated. They kept fighting until they won or died. This made no sense to the hegemony. It was illogical. It was wasteful. It was terrifying. One captured hegemony officer gave an interview that spread across the galaxy. "Humans fight wrong," he said, his voice trembling with something that might have been fear. "They do not follow the rules of war. They do not accept defeat. We destroyed one of their ships, and the crew kept fighting from the escape pods. We surrounded another, and they rammed their ship into our command vessel rather than surrender. They are not soldiers. They are something else. Something we do not understand." The humans called it determination. They called it courage. They called it love for their fallen brothers and sisters. Chief Engineer Lim Jae-won was 63 years old when the war began. He had worked in shipyards for 40 years, building the vessels that carried humanity to the stars. His hands were rough from decades of labor. His back was bent from years of hard work. By any measure, he should have stayed home and let younger people fight. Instead, he volunteered for combat duty. His commanders tried to refuse him. They said he was too old. They said he would be more useful building ships than fighting in them. But Jae-won would not listen. His granddaughter had been on Kepler Station. She had been 7 years old, with a bright smile and a love for flowers. Now she was gone, and Jae-won carried her memory like a wound that would never heal. "I owe them a debt," he told his commanders. "Let me pay it." They gave him a place on a boarding team. His job was to capture enemy ships so humans could study their technology. It was dangerous work. Most people who did it did not survive long. Jae-won survived. He participated in 12 boarding actions over the next 2 years. He moved through enemy ships with a welding torch in one hand and a pistol in the other. He was not fast, and he was not strong, but he was stubborn. He refused to die until his debt was paid. After his 13th boarding action, his commander finally ordered him to stop. "You have done enough," she said. "More than enough. Go home." Jae-won shook his head. "Home is where my granddaughter was. Home is gone. This ship is my home now. These soldiers are my family. I will stay with them until the end." The war continued. Human forces pushed deeper into hegemony territory. Systems that had been under alien control for thousands of years fell to human fleets. The hegemony was forced to pull ships from other regions to defend their core worlds. Their empire was shrinking, and nothing they did could stop it. Admiral Tova watched her empire crumble with growing desperation. She had started this war with a single order. She had thought it would be easy. Now she understood that she had made the worst decision in the history of her species. The humans were coming, and they were not going to stop until they reached the hegemony's heart. 2 years into the war, the hegemony controlled less territory than when they started. Their supply lines were broken by human raiders. Their soldiers were exhausted and afraid. Their confidence was shattered by an enemy that simply refused to give up. And across the galaxy, humans continued to build. They continued to fight. They continued to remember the 3,000 people who had died on Kepler Station. The war was far from over. But the ending was becoming clear. Humanity was going to win. The only question was how high the price would be, and whether there would be anything left when the fighting finally stopped. One galactic error triggered humanity's unstoppable fury. Part 4. The turning point. 3 years had passed since the destruction of Kepler Station. 3 years of war. 3 years of death. 3 years of humanity clawing its way across the stars, driven by grief and fury that refused to fade. The Galactic Council was no longer laughing at the humans. The species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive and weak now watched with growing fear. The hegemony, which had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years, was losing. Their fleets were broken. Their colonies were falling. Their legend of invincibility was destroyed. Admiral Tova stood before the council for the first time since the war began. She was not the same creature who had ordered the attack on Kepler Station. Her gray skin had turned pale. Her forearms hung limply at her sides. Her eyes, which had once burned with pride, were now hollow with exhaustion and fear. The council demanded answers. How had this happened? How had a species of 4 billion people from a single world defeated an empire of trillions? How had 50 ships become 5,000? How had farmers and teachers and engineers become soldiers who fought with the fury of ancient warriors? Tova had no answers. She had underestimated the humans. Everyone had underestimated the humans. And now the price of that mistake was about to be paid. Commodore O Taiwu had found what he was looking for. His intelligence officers had tracked the location of the hegemony's central command world. Valora Prime, the heart of the empire, the place where all decisions were made. If humanity could strike there, the war would be over. The human fleet that gathered for the final assault was the largest in history. 3,000 warships built in shipyards that had never stopped working, crewed by soldiers who had never stopped training. Every ship carried the names of the dead painted on its hull. Every crew member wore a badge with the symbol of Kepler Station. They had not forgotten. They would never forget. Admiral Shin Yunji commanded from the flagship Soul's Promise. She stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display that showed the enemy world ahead. Beside her stood Dr. Big Jian, who had traded her ambassador's robes for a military uniform. She had given up on diplomacy. Words had failed. Only force remained. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Valora Prime. The planet was beautiful, covered in purple forests and silver oceans. Cities sparkled on its surface like jewels. Billions of hegemony citizens lived there, going about their daily lives, unaware that death had arrived at their doorstep. The hegemony defense fleet moved to intercept. They had gathered every ship they could find, every warrior they could summon. But it was not enough. It was nowhere near enough. The humans tore through their formation like a blade through paper. Within hours, the defense fleet was destroyed. The orbital stations were captured. The weapons platforms were disabled. Valora Prime lay exposed and helpless beneath the human armada. Shin Yunji studied the planet on her display. 3 years ago, the creatures down there had celebrated the destruction of Kepler Station. They had laughed at human grief. They had called the massacre a regrettable necessity. Now those same creatures were looking up at the sky with terror in their hearts. "We can destroy them," Shin Yunji said quietly. "Completely. Their military is broken. Their defenses are gone. We could end the hegemony today. We could burn their cities and kill their people just as they killed ours. We could make them pay for every life they took." The bridge was silent. Everyone knew what she was saying. Everyone understood the choice before them. 3 years of rage demanded blood. 3 years of grief demanded revenge. Every soldier in the fleet had lost someone. Every ship had been built on a foundation of human tears. Commodore O Tai Wu stood near the weapons console. His finger hovered over the firing controls. One command, and the bombardment would begin. One word, and billions would die. He thought of his sister, floating dead among the wreckage of Kepler Station. He thought of the children who had been burned alive. He thought of all the families who would never be whole again. It would feel good to destroy them. It would feel right. An eye for an eye. A massacre for a massacre. Justice, delivered from orbit in fire and death. A voice broke the silence. It was soft and young, and it came from the pilot station. Lieutenant Park Sora was 24 years old. Both of her parents had died on Kepler Station. Her father had been a doctor, and her mother had been a teacher. She had joined the military the day after their deaths, driven by the same rage that burned in every human heart. But now, looking at the helpless world below, she felt something change inside her. "If we destroy them completely, we become what they were," she said. Her voice trembled, but she did not stop. "We become the monsters who kill without mercy. My parents died because the hegemony saw us as beneath consideration. They thought our lives did not matter. If we do the same to them, then what was the point of all this fighting?" Tai Wu turned to look at her. His eyes were hard, his jaw clenched. For a long moment, he said nothing. "They killed my sister," he said finally. "They killed 3,000 innocent people. They deserve to die." "Maybe they do," Sora replied. "But we do not deserve to become killers of billions. We are better than that. We have to be better than that. Otherwise, my parents died for nothing." The bridge remained silent. Officers looked at each other, uncertain. The weapons console glowed, ready to fire at a single command. Shin Yunji closed her eyes. She was a soldier. She had dedicated her life to protecting humanity. She had built this fleet with her own hands, trained these officers with her own voice. She wanted revenge as much as anyone, but she also remembered why she had become a soldier in the first place. Not to kill, not to destroy, to protect, to defend, to ensure that humanity survived and grew and became something worthy of the stars. "Stand down," she said finally. "All ships, hold position. We are not going to fire." Tai Wu stared at her. "Admiral, they killed my sister. They killed thousands of our people." "I know," Shin Yunji replied. "And we will make them answer for it. But not like this. We will surround their world. We will cut off their supplies. We will force them to surrender. But we will not become the thing we hate. We will not slaughter the innocent to punish the guilty." She turned to face the entire bridge crew. Her voice was strong and clear. "We are human beings. We fight hard, and we never give up. But we also know mercy. We know justice. We know the difference between enemies who carry weapons and civilians who just want to live their lives. Today, we prove to the galaxy that strength and compassion can exist together. Today, we show them what humanity really means. The order went out to the entire fleet. The weapons powered down. The bombardment that would have killed billions was cancelled. The human fleet formed a ring around Valora Prime. They did not attack. They did not retreat. They simply waited. 3 days later, the Hegemony Council sent a message. They were ready to discuss peace. Lieutenant Park Sora sat at her station, tears running down her face. She had lost her parents. She had spent 3 years dreaming of revenge. But in the moment when revenge was possible, she had chosen something else. She had chosen to be human. And that, she realized, was the greatest victory of all.